Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by Husky, Harry, Huggable Homos who love film. Try saying that 20 times fast, but you can't. To dish up a little bit of movie news sometimes, although this week, a little bit slow, but also review a film, either current or classic. And this week, we are keeping true to our promise of reviewing a new film. We are going to be discussing The Dark Tower, the new film based on the Stephen King novel starring Idris Elba and Matthew, all right, McConaughey. But in the upcoming weeks, as we enter the summer bleak peak season, maybe we'll pick some classic movies to talk about. We'll have to see. We've also got a special treat coming up next week. More on that later. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to two gentlemen whom I could literally not live my life without. Jim Pugliafco, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is here, too. Welcome, Will.
Hey there, movie boys, movie girls, and movie bears. Glad to be back with you again this week.
I'm also glad that we're going to be back together in like 2.5 months for Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas.
Yes, right around the corner, just a few short weeks away.
Yeah, it's coming up quick. I mean, it's like, okay, so it's not 2.5 months, right? Because it's August, not July at this point. So
it's like 1.5 months, or it's a month and change.
A month and change. Wow, that's crazy.
It's end of September.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think we get into town September 20th. So yeah, that's like
2 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo, boy, can't wait. Well, in any event, if anyone's going to be around for Fantastic Fest, seek us out. That ended up being like an under the rug kind of plug or something. I don't know.
Under the rug plug.
In any event, we've got a bit of a shorter show for you guys this week. We don't have much going on in the way of movie news, so we are going to be diving right into our review of The Dark Tower. For those of you who may be new to our format, we are going to talk about the movie spoiler-free, in case you're on the fence about checking this one out, and a lot of people are. Actually, this movie's gotten some interesting reviews, to say the least. So if you're on the fence and you're wondering our thoughts, we'll give you our impressions, whether we think you should check it out, before we go full on into spoiler pound town. But first, want to give a shout out to those folks who are joining us in the live chat. Ryan, good to see you. We've got a couple other folks as well. If you're joining us live, jump into that live chat. Say hello. Let us know your thoughts on The Dark Tower, whether you think you'll see it, whether you saw it, what you thought of it. And as long as your thoughts are YouTube appropriate, we may give you a shout out on air. My gosh, I've been talking a long time. Whew. Guys, are we ready to just dive right in to the movie discussion like this? Usually we have some build up, but I mean, we're just going to like jackhammer it in.
Yeah, I'm always down for a good jackhammering.
Yeah, let's get into this one, and we'll see what we can make out of just having a review this week.
All right. Sounds good. This will be a Movie Bears podcast experiment. Let's go ahead then and dive right into our discussion of The Dark Tower. Actually, let me do that again because I kind of whispered a little and I saw Jim roll his eyes. Here we go. Our discussion of The Dark Tower. Is that better, Jim?
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Let's do a real one here. Here we go.
Go ahead.
Do it.
Here we go. Our discussion of all right. No, that wasn't it either. Jim, do you want to do it?
Take 4.
Sure. Here we go. Our discussion of The Dark Tower.
That was really good, babe. I'm very impressed by your lead in there. That was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Yeah, just different cadence. That's all. Switch
sometimes
it up a little bit.
It's good to change things up a little bit sometimes. Nothing wrong with that at all.
It is. You got to be versatile.
What's going to be great is he's going to first of all, that was a good live take. Anyone watching the video right now is able to see that. But Jim's also our editing guru, so he's going to go in and make that just the best intro ever. He's got that, he wields that power.
He does wield that power very well. Speaking of wielding power, Ryan in the chat says, I don't podcast with my mic. I podcast with my soul.
Yeah. He who podcasts with his mic has forgotten
the face of his father.
Oh, poor father.
Father's always having his face forgotten.
Whatever that means.
What the fuck does father look like again?
He looks like the All-State guy. Remember?
I was doing some target practice the other day, just kind of shooting some shots off willy-nilly, and like, fuck, what does that dude look like? I don't know.
The Dark Tower's in good hands with Allstate. In any event. All right, so Will, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of just, of a synopsis here, spoiler free, of course, for anyone who hasn't seen the film, and your initial thoughts. Is this worth checking out? Should people maybe see it in theaters, rent it, skip it? What do you think?
Absolutely. So there's kind of a lot to front load about The Dark Tower, because this is a film that has a lot of history kind of prior to pre-production, prior to what we saw on screen. This is a film that's based off of a fairly successful, a very successful Stephen King series of books. In fact, this is a 7-part book series by him, and I think what a lot of Stephen King fans, probably the author himself, would sort of consider to be like the opus of his literary career. And so there were a lot of high expectations based around this particular work. So the film itself is, let's just do the description. The film itself is, the last gunslinger, Roland Duchesne, has been locked in an eternal battle with Walter O'Dem, also known as the Man in Black, determined to prevent him from toppling the Dark Tower, which holds the universe together. With the fate of the worlds at stake, good and evil will collide in the ultimate battle, as only Roland can defend the tower from the Man in Black. Which is a good enough description for for what this story is about, and we're basically telling the story of these two worlds that are sort of locked up against one another. One of which is our world, one of which is this sort of fantasy / mild science fiction / very like Western themed type world. A lot of different influences being pulled in there. You've got a boy from our world who's youngish boy, like I don't know his exact age, but
freshman in high school, maybe
13,
something like that.
Who's been having these weird dreams and things, like of this other world, and it's disturbed him, and he, through plot and story, ends up getting embroiled in this story between the gunslinger, which is Idris Elba's character, in his battle against Matthew McConaughey's Man in Black. I'm someone who personally I'm sort of in between in terms of like where I'm at as a fan of this particular series. There's some people who've never read the books, totally fine. There's people who have read these books forward and backwards multiple times, and these have been a formative part of their literary experiences. And that's fine as well. I'm somewhere in between. I've read some of the books. I have not read all of them. I don't have these are not like these books are not my children, and if I would be okay with them completely changing the story and completely morphing things if it served a strong film. Unfortunately, I don't think that's what we got here. When I look at this film as an adaptation of a book series, I feel like it absolutely missteps kind of every step along the way. Even if I look at it as its own property, if I take all of that out, I don't find this to be a particularly interesting or creative or memorable story in and of itself as we see it on screen. I can't blame Idris Elba for that. I think Idris Elba did the best job with the material. I feel like we didn't get to see... Idris Elba is the type of actor who just absolutely drips charisma, and I don't think we got to see all of that here, but I think that the material was trying to get him to play this subdued badass. So I don't blame him. I blame the material. Same with Matthew McConaughey. He's the type of guy who can't turn in a bad performance, but here I don't think he really turned in a good performance. There's even parts of it that feel a little over the top and hokey. I don't know. Some of the action is okay. There's actually one scene in this movie, like with a good little, kind of in the middle, there's this action sequence that I quite enjoyed. There's some action sequences that I absolutely detested because they just looked bad on the screen. Like they were not things that were pleasing for my eyeballs. The story didn't work. I think the narrative was way too rushed, especially with as ambitious as a story as they were trying to tell with the 90-minute runtime that they limited themselves to. I can't recommend this movie for people who have read the book or for people who haven't. I really don't see much of value here. It's not the worst thing I've seen at theaters this year. I think some people might have a slightly better experience than me, but I don't know. This just didn't do much for me.
Well, I would say you're not alone. It didn't do a lot for me either. In fact, the most entertaining part of this movie for me was Jake's hot stepdad, who's kind of an asshole, but I was just Googling like shirtless pictures of him, and sadly I can't find any, so that's a bummer. So man, where to start with this movie?
Lon?
Yes, Lon. Guys, I love Idris Elba. He's fantastic. He's amazing. This movie really doesn't give him much fantastic or amazing material to work with, and that's unfortunate because this movie is rather loosely based on a great Stephen King novel, right? So it's unfortunate that I don't know, the Roland character just seems so two-dimensional compared to the actual character in the books. Granted, I haven't read all the books, and I'm not going to say I'm a book expert or anything, but and even as chewy as those books kind of were for me, I feel like I don't know, I just got such like a surface level with this film, and it just wasn't super engaging. Part of that is Tom Taylor, you know, he plays Jake the boy, and Jake just comes off as a very blah character. Like, I don't care about him when he starts, you know, talking about the dreams he's having, da 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 da. I'm like, oh great, another pretentious kid that I don't care anything about. I think he probably did his best given the material. Writing, I think, is not one of this movie's strong points, unfortunately. So whether the fault is Tom Taylor, the actor, whether it's the writing, whether it's the direct, I mean, probably a little column A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I don't know. Matthew McConaughey, Jim, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but you said something to me at the movie theater yesterday that I thought was brilliant. Jim turns to me as the credits begin
Remind
to roll,
me.
And he's like,
because I've forgotten about it already.
What was it? How did you put it? The McConaughey-essence?
The McConaissance might be ending.
The McConaissance.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
As the tower comes down, so does the McConaissance.
You need to get that a think piece with exactly that title on Google right now, so that like before that's going to get snatched up. That's really good. Yeah, you need to SEO the shit out of that.
Absolutely. And I think it was such an apt way of putting it. Obviously, babe, you can talk more about your thoughts there, but yeah, God, he's so wasted in this film, and I actually found him annoying. Like, all the annoying things about Matthew McConaughey in the past that I've started to look past because of films like Mud, where I'm like, oh, hey, like, he's actually an actor with some chops, just totally go out the window here. I might encourage people to go see this movie if you're in the mood for something interesting visually, but like, even the CGI is fucking terrible. Like, there's a scene, and it's in the trailer, so it's not a surprise, where like there's a broken window and glass shards are flying, and Matthew McConaughey is like, and the shards are like flying in front of him, and it's like 2006 like Smallville TV budget effects, which were pretty good for 2006, I won't lie, but you know, in a movie in 2017, like, come on, guys, like, you can do better than that. So, you know, for me, we're entering, like I said, the summer bleak peak season, whatever you want to call it. If you're really looking for something to go out, check out, maybe this can be it. But I mean, honestly, I would say wait for rental on this one if you see it at all. And if you're not super interested in the sort of the story setup, I'd probably just say skip it. The only other high note for me, guys, was Jackie Earle Haley. It was great to see him show up here. I didn't even realize he was going to be in the movie. And then I was like, oh, it's Jackie Earle Haley. All right, this is going to be great. And then, well, we'll talk more, but you know, I don't know. Not great for me. Jim, how about you?
Well, that's too bad. I mean, you know, it's not a great movie when you see Jackie Earle Haley and you're thinking back to the original Bad News Bears and what a good movie that was. And like, you know, you just can't stay in the moment with this movie. You know, I'm going to defend some things about this movie. I'm going to say right up front that this movie is very forgettable. It's not a good movie. I'm not going to recommend people go out and spend money on this because I just don't think it's that good. I'm kind of with you, Brad. Like, I think if people are curious about this movie to see, does it live down to its low expectations of like its less than 20% Rotten Tomatoes rating, then you probably want to rent it when it's available for rent. This movie baffles me in terms of how it kind of came about. I think that it's been a property that's been talked about for a long time. You guys mentioned that it's a 7-part book series. Like, who would have the idea to take a 7-book series and boil it down to an hour-and-a-half movie? Like, on the surface, that just sounds really silly. Unless you're totally gonna like start, maybe you're gonna cover the first part of the book series and make it like a movie series or even a TV series, that you're gonna do. It just doesn't make sense, and the movie suffers for it because I've never read the books, but hearing people talk about it and knowing that it's the kind of the centerpiece of Stephen King's oeuvre, if you will, it's like they take the 7-part book series and they totally skim right across it. And so what you end up with at the end is a story that, yeah, maybe they're hitting some of the points, but you don't know the whys or you have no investment in the story. It just doesn't make a lot of sense because it's not grounded to any story. It's just like they're hitting these scenes and you're asking yourself, okay, why is that? Now, why are these two guys squaring off again? Like, what are the stakes here? It's so surfacey and thin that it's just totally unmemorable, and it doesn't all really hang together. It jumps around. It doesn't jump around in time or anything like that, but it just jumps from thing to thing to thing until it gets to the end. It feels rushed, especially at the end, which we'll talk about in spoilers. It feels very abrupt. I just can't recommend it. I will say that in terms of performances, I mean, Matthew McConaughey, it's the weirdest villain that I've seen in a long time. You just have no idea what his motivation is, really. Like, is he working for somebody else? Is he acting on his own? And what is his history with the gunslinger? All that kind of stuff. Not great. Idris Elba, great actor. I love him. He didn't have anything to really work. I mean, he's got swagger in this movie. He's kind of like a very quiet, stoic hero, I guess you could say. But I don't know if that. He reminded me a lot of The Rock in this movie. Like,
like when he did that eyebrow thing.
Yeah, He's kind of like he was channeling The Rock a little bit. I could definitely see it in some of the way he came across, which is not a bad thing because I love Dwayne Johnson in movies. This movie would have been better if it was The Rock in this role doing the stuff that The Rock does. Like maybe adding a little of that like Baywatch humor in there. I think it might have been pretty good. The kid was fine. Actually, the setup of this movie, the first 15 minutes or so, when the earthquakes are happening and you're not sure what's going on and you're seeing all these drawings and you're kind of in your mind, you're like thinking, oh, this maybe could be pretty good if they get into it. I actually like that stuff pretty well until about 20 minutes in, and I think it was after we'll talk about the spoilers later, but I actually like the setup of this movie. I was hooked in for the first 15 or 20 minutes. I'm like, this movie doesn't suck. This isn't that bad. And then it just totally kind of slowly went off the cliff. But no, I can't recommend it. Want to talk more about this movie with you guys. It probably shouldn't have been attempted as a movie. I just don't know how you could put 7 books worth of epic story into an hour and a half. I just don't know how it's going to work. I don't know has any other movie really done something like that? Condense that big a scale down to such a small thing?
Well, and I guess that's a point. Like, this wasn't quite a condensation of all 7 books. What it was and it's hard to get into this without spoiling the book series,
Yeah.
but what it does is it's almost like a reimagining of some of the stories, and it borrows elements from. It borrows the main plot of the first book, but pulls in a lot of the elements of the other ones. And I think that what made the first book work so well for me is it is a remarkably simple story with very few characters, without a lot of, like, you don't get a lot of motivation there either, but the simplicity of the story, it's sort of a pursuit, one person pursuing another character to a thing. And because of that, it's a very straightforward story that kind of sets up the rest of this crazy stuff to happen from there. Here, they just, I feel like they didn't feel confident in their material enough to tell that simplistic story. And so they decided to, kind of razzle dazzle as much as they could by throwing in additional plot elements. And I mean, it did not work. It did not work at all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That didn't work.
So real quick, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our friend Sam in Denver, who said that, this would definitely work, I guess, a little bit better, maybe, as a TV series, which we know is coming at some point. But I'm a little gun shy about a TV series. Gun shy, get it? I didn't even do that on purpose. I'm a little gun shy about a TV series now because it's kind of like, God, like if Stephen King would let them do this in a movie.
Stephen King's had a history. Unfortunately, Stephen King has a history of bad films and miniseries. Like, there are a few incredible exceptions that come through here and there, but there's just so much shit that's floated to the top. I mean, even what I would say is hands down the best Stephen King adaptation is Kubrick's The Shining, and that one was basically throwing out a lot of the King stuff and telling a completely different story. So yeah, you run into this really bad boat right now because, like, I feel like if they had done this right, this would have been as we're hearing in chat, TV series from the start, I think would have been a great way to do this. You would have had to have taken your time, trusted the material, let the characters get you on board. We have this now. This movie now exists. So either something from here on out would be a continuation of this movie, and that's a house built on a shaky foundation, or they'd have to go back to the drawing board and reinvent it, which I think they need to do, but they would now have to wait quite a bit of time before they could do it and launch it successfully. So I think this movie has pretty much shit on any possibility of a good television series coming out in the near future.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't looked at the box office numbers, but I think it's underperforming. So it got bashed by the critics. Not that that's the be all and end all of anything, because bad movies sometimes do pretty well at the box office. Transformers, looking at you, but I just don't know how well this one's going to do, given its word of mouth and so forth. And I don't know. It's kind of like if people who read the books probably have a curiosity to see how this movie turned out. People who didn't read the books, I don't know, what is the draw here? Like, I mean, you see this guy Idris Elba dressed like he's out of the Old West with, kind of a mixture of the Old West and the Matrix with with 6-shooters. Like, that doesn't really, in this day and age of the Western and stuff is not really big. I just don't see what the big draw is here.
Yeah, if you take the book series out of this entirely, like, let's say that series doesn't exist at all, and we're just talking about the movie as a standalone, no baggage entity. What we're really looking at here is a less good version of Last Action Hero, right? And Last Action Hero wasn't a masterpiece, folks. But this is like a less entertaining and less fun version of that premise, and that's not something I would recommend to someone.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's an unfortunate movie. I think we can definitely go into spoilers. We've got some things we can talk about there for sure. But are there any other non-spoiler points you guys want to hit before we take that dive?
Well, I mentioned it already, but the movie, I think, is like think the movie's like 90 minutes long or something like that. So that's pretty short. If you get 20 or 30 minutes in and you're hating it, you only got like another hour to go. So that's not bad.
Oh, is that our plus column? Like
that's in the plus column. Yeah.
So, definitely length is a plus sometimes, but sometimes. In this case, I think it was a negative, right? Like, imagine with 15 more minutes to maybe develop some of these stories. I mean, honestly, I don't think there's a lot you could have done to save it, but this movie could have used a few more minutes to try to tell the story it was trying to tell. Brad, you mentioned the CGI being kind of rough during some sequences, and I wanted to just thank you for calling that out, because I had that same problem. That last scene for me, and we'll talk about it later, but just in the pre-spoiler section, there's some effects there, the trailer thing, the holding up the glass and stuff with the hands. You mentioned it reminds you of Smallville. It reminded me of, do you remember the first Fantastic Four movie with Jessica Alba? Like
when she's doing her
and she would do these like goofy hand poses for her like invisibility. Like, it looked like that. It looked like they didn't give McConaughey good direction in terms of what he needed to do with his hands. So it looked remarkably artificial. Like, you could tell this was a guy who was just moving his hands and the glass was added later.
Yeah, that's totally true. And, it's unfortunate because I think with some really cool visual stuff, there's a propensity to kind of save this a little bit. Like, I was most interested when we saw like the exterior of the tower and like some things happening, it's in the trailer, like bolts of energy headed for the tower. I was like, oh yes, this is cool. Like, I'm on board. Let's do this. And we'll talk more about it in spoilers. And I feel like we should just make that transition. But I don't know. Like, there was just so little of the cool visual stuff, so much of the bad CGI, that it just makes it really hard for me to recommend this, even from a visual standpoint. So, there's that. So, Jim, any other non-spoiler points before we make the transition?
I thought I had something, but I'll just bring it up in spoilers.
All right. Sounds good. Well, then we are going to go ahead and officially move into our spoiler section. If you've not yet seen The Dark Tower and you want to protect your mind from an invasion of spoilers, now is your time to step away for 15 or 20 minutes, then come on back for some plugs. This is the part where I awkwardly ramble to give you time to mute your computer if you're listening live, or use the handy-dandy time index in the show notes to skip ahead. But guys, we're done stalling. Spoilers officially fair game. I have a question for you. With this whole focus on Jake Chambers and like the community where Matthew McConaughey is like bringing the kids and trying to like use their shine or whatever to like destroy the tower, did you guys get like a YA vibe at all? Like The Giver mixed with like Hunger Games or something? Like, what do you think?
It's amazing how many different movies flashed into my mind while watching this movie. Everything from Monster House. I don't know if you guys got the Monster House references, but I got that. There was the scene where he goes into the house, right? Like, in the middle of New York City, there's this big wooden like haunted house. Like, come on, that doesn't exist. And then you go in, and then the house starts like attacking him, like the boards of the house, or like for whatever reason, I have no idea why or who was controlling that. But I was thinking Monster House in that scene, and it's another light in the. It's another big light in the sky movie. I had, I don't know, just this tech area where these guys were, where they strapped the kids in. It totally had one of those like YA crossed with Fantastic Four kind of vibes to it.
And that's not what this series should be. Like, this is like, we've seen films like this before. When you think about The Giver and kind of say like, oh, it had these YA elements, at least you can say, well, it was a YA book. It was one of the first big YA books. You can get why it was made into the type of film it was. The same thing with Love 'Em or Hate 'Em or wherever you're at with the Divergent films or Hunger Games or Maze Runners or whatever. Those are films that are based off of a book series and told that type of story on film. This is not a young adult story. This is, you know, like, while there is a prominent kid character in the story, it is not this. This was ungood. This was the opposite of interesting to me. And I think the big structural issue with this for me, in terms of the way they told the story, is they started off in the real world, and after a little bit of time, we then follow that character, Jake, as he then goes into this other world. So it does have that sort of, like, again, I mentioned Last Action Hero jokingly before, but like, it has one of those stories where it's sort of like there's this other fantasy world that exists, but the real world is our world. My recollection of the source materials, it's the other way around. We spend a lot of time just with Roland by himself before we ever interact with any characters from any other time frames. And I know that that's, you know, adapting something from book to film, you can do a lot of different things with it. I think that's a huge structural problem, because I think everything that comes after that, it turns it into a whimsical fantasy exploration, as opposed to this weird Western story that ends up having these unique ties to the real world kind of unfold slowly. I wanted that story.
The way this movie works is like you're with Jake for the first 15 to 20 to 25 minutes of the movie, and then we stumble across the gunslinger. Like, in this random scene, about 20 to 25 minutes in, you get transported to this, like, smash cut to this kind of other world where it's foggy and it's kind of a apocalyptic wasteland, and he's shooting at the Man in Black, and that's where you first see, like, the bullet time, you know, him grabbing the bullet from behind his head. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And that was kind of cool. And, you know, then we see the whole the Man in Black has the ability to, like, just tell people to die, basically. Like, he doesn't really have to do anything. He just says, okay, you die now, or stop breathing, and then they die. And
apparently he's Kilgrave from Jessica Jones.
Yeah, it's very strange. And so, you know, where did he get his powers? And, you know, it's, like I said, it's all very surfacey and just not, there's more questions than answers in this movie. And at some point you just check out.
So do you guys realize why the Man in Black wanted Jake so badly?
Yeah.
Because he had and this is where it all ties together, he had the shine. Like,
no, the correct answer is because he's so shiny.
Oh, okay, yeah, because now Moana's no, actually, Brad, I'm not gonna allow you to place Moana in the Dark Tower universe. No.
Monster House, Moana, Stargate.
Oh God, yeah. So Jim, to your point, ridiculous Brad joke aside, the elements that you bring up are what initially had my interest, like the history of the Dark Tower itself. Who is the Man in Black? Where do his powers come from? What is his fucking motivation in wanting to let all the demons and darkness in to the world? Like, did he make some kind of deal with them? Like, is chaos a ladder that he wants to climb? Like, why? I don't understand. Why are we hooking kids up to head machines? Apparently we want to destroy the giant black dick that, like, holds back all the demons. But, like,
or is
why?
It, I mean, you see reference to this Crimson King written in graffiti on the wall, but it's never explained what that is. I don't think, right? Unless I missed something. It's really strange.
They do a little bit with it. You basically, you know that there's this group of people on this world who are trying to destroy the tower, which holds everything apart, because there's something beyond the barrier, beyond our world, that wants to destroy it. So here's my problem. And I agree, like, they didn't explain a whole lot in this film between motivations or the Crimson King and all that stuff. In theory, I don't have a problem with that necessarily if the film didn't try to explain so many other things. I think that's where the disconnect happens. I think you can set up a very simple story with very simple concepts. There is this group of people that wants to destroy this thing. One of them is kind of powerful, and here's how they're planning and going about things. You can tell a story with those basic elements and be fine. I'm on board with you just tell me the things I need to know. But this film went out of its way to try to explain so much else. Well, this boy has it was almost like Dragon Ball Z at times, because they kept like reading Jake's power levels. And it's like at some points they were over 9,000, and so like we kept getting all of this over explanation of the new elements that were introduced into the story, while keeping the intentionally underdeveloped stuff from the book series. And that disconnect leaves us asking more questions as opposed to being patient with the story and letting it dole things out as it comes. Again, that's bad adaptation. That's bad narrative.
Yeah, and the whole thing about, when we come upon the gunslinger, he's obviously had some kind of history with the Man in Black. Is he?
Well, he killed his father, right? So there's.
Well, we saw that happen, but you get a sense that something before that was going on. Well,
I think
were in some kind of conflict before.
Right. I think the Man in Black called out that he killed like his brother and sister gunslingers or something, and like
the other Knights of Eld. Yeah.
Right. And because he couldn't like order around Roland, he like killed everybody that meant anything to Roland. So there's that.
Okay. So yeah, it might have been mentioned, but it didn't feel like stakes to me. Like, I'm not sure why these two guys are actually going at it. And I don't even know why the Man in Black wants the tower destroyed. Like you said, what is his motivation for wanting to unleash this stuff? Usually there's a motivation. Like, they think they're going to gain something.
And again, like that's the series doesn't really get into his motivations until way later on in the series, which again is fine when you have a long game story that you're getting at, right? Yeah. Like, you're going to get to some of these things. Here, they explain everything else except for his motivations. It stands out. Again, if they had stripped out all this extra crap out of this movie, I don't think we would have been sitting here wondering why the guy was doing the things he was doing. We'd be talking about like the interesting character development, the interesting interactions between Jake and Roland as they both learned and grew from one another. We didn't get that. We don't have anything else to sink our teeth into, so we can see discrepancies all the more apparently. Now, go ahead.
No, it's because the motivations are what make me care. Like, knowing a little bit about the motivations kind of hook me in, make me like care about this guy's reason for what his actions are and what the conflict is. And do I take a side here or do I not? I don't know. Maybe there's something good that happens if the tower comes down. We don't know. Maybe McConaughey thinks that there is.
Both over-explains and under-explains at the same time. And I mean, that's a problem. Now, there was one scene that I sort of liked in this film, but I'm going to damn it with faint praise. There's this scene right in the middle where there's this attack that happens on this small little kind of like outpost town where a bunch of these kind of goofy-looking wolfmen attack this this little outpost town. And it was fine. Like, I think some of the things that were happening there, just kind of the chaos of a nighttime assault, looked fine enough to me. And that was the first time we got to see Roland kind of like doing some of his like, okay, I'm a good gunsman, and I liked some of that stuff, because later on in the film, his gun magic, like, and it is gun magic, like, gets very ridiculous and very over the top and kind of quickly and without proper escalation. But at this stage, he's still kind of getting back into it. I liked that quite a bit. The damning with faint praise, though, is this had like this scene had a money shot, like sort of like the kind of the cherry on top of the sundae in terms of just like, like Roland kind of like getting things back together and like, okay, I know what I need to do. I remember the face of my father, all this. And that's when everything slows down and he does that one shot kind of like through everything.
Right.
that was the scene. Like that's the defining moment
trailer,
for this character, and it was a major part of the trailer. So when he does that, I wasn't thinking like, oh my god, is he about to do this? I was like, okay, here's that long.
Here it comes.
Trailer.
Right.
I'm just gonna I'm gonna grab a sip here. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I'll come back when something new is on the screen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
And what is it that I didn't understand? Like, did he have, like, he could grab bullets out of the air or redirect them with his hands or something, and then throw them back at the same speed that they were coming in at or something?
Apparently.
But yet, apparently, as we see in the movie, he can't take bullets to the body, but he could take them to the hands. I don't understand that.
Well,
go ahead.
So
go, Red.
The way this all resolves, right, is like the gunslinger shoots a bullet at him, and then the man in black like goes to like catch the bullet or whatever. And then the gunslinger shoots another bullet, which somehow is able to travel faster than the first bullet, hit that first bullet, and then like ricochet it like away from his hand, like into the man in black's like chest or whatever. So physics don't exactly seem to be like a consistent force in this world, I guess.
And that was my problem. Like, I didn't necessarily have a problem with like I just saw McConaughey's characters like
mystical.
If we're calling it like if we're looking in superhero terms, he's like a telepath, telekinetic. Like he can do basically a bunch of things with his mind. And so he was doing a lot of things where like, okay, he was deflecting the bullets or he was slowing down their velocity, picking them up and speeding them back. I could totally like get on board with a lot of those things because these were things that we've seen this character do. Even though they looked silly the way he was doing his hands, like you didn't have to do a whole lot. Like, okay, he has the ability to slow down, speed up bullets, fine, whatever. But Roland doing the shot and then using the second shot to do it, Roland has not demonstrated the ability to accelerate or decelerate his bullets. And yet he had to have done that right there during that weird ricochet bullet shot there. So that was to me the least believable thing in the entire movie, and because it wasn't really established or set up appropriately, and it was the big final moment of the movie.
Yeah.
So
unless the first bullet, I can't remember exactly. Did he ricochet the first bullet and then shoot the second bullet directly? Because that might make more sense.
Maybe there was some bouncing around that I missed. It was a little muddy to follow. Yeah. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, guys, I think JP in the chat just solved a mystery for us, though. Apparently, the gunslinger is either the gunslinger or hey, maybe it was the man in black is the one who shot JFK. Maybe that explains the grassy knoll and the discrepancy with some of the angles. The man in black like was totally just like hand waving bullets, and it was an unfortunate byproduct apparently.
Interestingly enough, that was one of Stephen King's other big works that's recently been adapted into a television series was what was it, 11/22/63, which is the series on Hulu, and it had a book about the guy that did time travel to prevent the assassination of JFK. So I guess we've just proven that all of Stephen King's books are already kind of linked, but I think we have a very definitive tie-in between Idris Elba. I'm not sorry, the gunslinger, and the assassination of JFK. It works really well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, we do have The Shine. Yeah, they literally called it the Shine. This
right.
is the same Shining that the kid had in The Shining.
Danny, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, do we really have anything else to say about The Dark Tower?
It sucks that we came in here and shit on it. I wish that we didn't have to. But I mean, the movie did this to us. Like, it's not like we came in here relishing the idea of not being a fan of this. I wanted to like this, but the movie didn't give us something that I could enjoy.
I really wanted to as well. I mean, I heard some of the reviews were not kind, but you guys know me. I deliberately go out of my way, like, not to read anything about movies ahead of time. Like, I want to experience them as purely as possible. So going into this film, I'm like, man, you know, I really want to like this actually. Like maybe it's getting some unfair like shit heaping. But no, I think it was pretty fair. And you know, the tower's dark because it's covered in shit. So
my God.
That's the movie.
Is that your theory? It's a big sewage processing facility.
It is, and it's the smell that holds the demons back, actually, not a magical force field. So, you know, nice. Keep that in mind too. But JP says, do read the books, guys. They're pretty nifty. So JP, thanks for that recommendation. When I have time to read 7 books as an adult, that'll go on the list somewhere. I don't know. We'll fit it in, but it's got to get the bad taste out of this movie.
There's always audiobooks. There's always the audiobooks.
It's true. I actually bought the audiobook of The Dark Tower today, and I'm thinking of starting it just because I've been listening to Watership Down. And guys, the narrator, God, like I'm new to audiobooks, and seriously, like everyone I've listened to except for like one, the narrators have been awful, even when they're famous people. So, you know, I'm kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I'll listen to it. Maybe I won't. We'll see. But I bought it. So, JP, thanks for the recommendation there. We appreciate that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into some plugs as we look to wrap up for this week. I want to give a collective shout out for all 3 of us. I will be the mouthpiece, but this is really all of us. Bear City 3, directed by a friend of the show, Doug Langway, recently came out on DVD and Blu-ray. It's also available for rent on Vimeo as well as YouTube. The film was making the film festival rounds for a while, gotten a lot of good press and some good praise from our community. And we have a cameo in the movie. Doug invited us to film a scene. We haven't seen it yet, but we got our copy over the weekend while we were up on the mountain gym camping. So we may watch that tonight after the show. I bring it up because A, you should check out the movie. If you like the first 2, definitely check it out. B, even if you haven't seen the first 2 movies, we're in the 3rd one. So if you like our show, maybe check it out for our scene. And C, we are going to have Doug Langway on the show this time next week, talking about Bear City 3, his experience filming the movie, maybe what's next, what else is going on. And we may possibly have someone from the cast of the film joining Doug. We'll see who may be joining. But even if it's just Doug himself, we're super stoked to sit down with that guy. We love him. He's amazing. Can't wait to chat. So here's your homework, Movie Bears podcast listeners. Before our show next Monday, if you're listening live right now, you have a full week. If you're listening on digital tape delay, you likely have 4 days, Jim? 5?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
4. To see this movie in anticipation of that show. So definitely check it out and join us next week.
Yeah, get on it on the weekend. I mean, last time we had Doug on the show, it was a real blast. Doug's a super fun guy to hang out with, whether it's in person or on over the computers. So I can't wait to be able to talk to Doug again. It's gonna be great.
Indeed. All right, so check it out. Moving on along, Jim, what have you got this week?
I've been kind of catching up on my list of movies that have been mentioned or I've seen mention of. Well, and I don't remember if you plugged this one or not, but I'm pretty sure you've seen it. It's a 2017 movie, a dark comedy called Take Me. This is Pat Healy directed, and he also stars in it. Also stars Taylor Schilling, who you Orange is the New Black fans. She's Piper on that show. So it's basically most of the movie is Pat Healy and Taylor Schilling doing their thing. This is a dark comedy about Pat Healy's an entrepreneur, you could say, who is his specialty is conducting abductions for hire. This isn't like for kidnap money. These are actual people who pay him to kidnap them for various reasons, whether it's to get them to stop eating or, because they're into punishment and bondage, whatever. Anyway, he does kidnappings. One of these kidnappings goes horribly wrong, and it turns into kind of this strange genre movie where you don't really know who's playing who. by the end of the movie. It's a pretty good movie. It's you know, it's a fun movie to rent. I found it's actually for free. If you have Netflix, it's available right now on Netflix for your you know, streaming for your subscription. So if you got a Netflix subscription, see the movie called Take Me.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Will, close us out for plugs.
Absolutely. There's a film that's out in theaters right now that I'd like to plug. It's the new Catherine Bigelow movie called Detroit. And I put a written review up for it on our website, so you can feel free to read that for kind of the more in-depth discussion. But this is a film that tells the story of the Algiers motel massacre from the 60s in Detroit. And it's a quite worthy film to watch. Catherine Bigelow, this is the same director that gave us like The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. She's really good at filming these really tense scenes, and so this film is all predicated on the idea of like one very tense moment extending over an very long sequence, and that's it's a remarkable sequence. Film isn't perfect, has some flaws. The end, it doesn't necessarily nail its landing, but I think it's still ultimately a good film, one that I enjoyed watching, one that I think would be I mean, it's an intense movie, so it's definitely not a date night type movie, but I definitely think it's an important one, and it's very relevant with some of the things that are happening right now. So yeah, definitely check out Detroit in theaters now.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for that, Will. Guys, that wraps us up for this week. Real quick, before we do our final sign-off, Jim, where can people find you online if they want to chat movies with you?
Find me on Twitter. You can either tweet me there or direct message me there at JJP Out West, all one word.
All right. Awesome. And Will, how about you?
Yeah, you can find me a few places. Check me out on Twitter at Whatever Cove. Check me out on Facebook, William Lindis. Check me out on Letterboxd, also William Lindis. So yeah, come look for me on social media, guys.
All right. Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro, or find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one with Bear, Chubb, and Chaser friends in common with you, likely. The other Brad Harris that I've run into on Facebook looks like an NRA gun nut, so that's definitely not me. Also, he looks like he's about 100 pounds, and obviously I'm not. So hopefully it's easy for you to spot the difference. Just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who joined us in the chat tonight. Sam and Craig and JP and Ryan and everybody else. I know we didn't get to give a shout out to everybody as you were talking, but we were following the conversation as best we can. Love seeing you guys getting so like crazy rabid about some of this stuff in the chat. Always a pleasure for you to join us. So thank you again for being part of the show. Glad to see you guys. Also glad for all of you out there in digital tape delay listener land who are not watching us live. If you're listening to us on your morning commute, if you're listening to us as you work out at the gym, good on you, by the way, for going to the gym. We need to do more of that. In any event, goodbye, everybody. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.